First Contact's mockery. The holographic display flickered in the United Earth Council chamber as Ambassador Chen watched the Zephyrian delegation's message replay for the 10th time. Their tall, crystalline forms seemed to sparkle with barely concealed disdain as they delivered their assessment of humanity. These organisms barely qualify as a spacefaring species, the lead delegate's translated words rang out. Their propulsion systems rely on crude fusion reactions. Their computational systems still use silicon-based processors. They haven't even begun to harness dark matter for basic energy needs. We grant them observer status purely out of tradition, nothing more. Chen's expression remained carefully neutral, decades of diplomatic training serving her well. Inside, though, she felt a familiar warmth of satisfaction. The Zephyrians, like so many advanced species, had fallen into the trap of assuming there was only one path to technological advancement. In the Classify facility 20 kilometers beneath the Mariana Trench, Project Director Dr. Sarah Martinez was watching the same broadcast. Her hands moved across the bioelectric interface panel, its living circuits responding to her touch as she continued final preparations on humanity's greatest achievement. The INS Prometheus waited in its berth, a vessel that looked deceptively simple to outside observers. Status report, she called out to her team. Quantum consciousness matrix at 98% synchronization, Dr. Kumar reported from his station. The ship's awareness is fully integrated with the biological components. Gravitic pulse arrays are charged and stable, Lieutenant Rogers added. All 18-dimensional anchors are secure. Martinez allowed herself a small smile. The Zephyrians, for all their advanced technology, thought in linear terms. Their massive fleets relied on brute force application of natural laws. Humanity had taken a different approach entirely. When humans first discovered they couldn't match alien civilizations in conventional technology, they'd asked different questions entirely. Instead of asking how to build bigger engines, they'd asked why engines needed to move through space at all. Instead of developing faster computers, they'd questioned the nature of computation itself. The Prometheus was the result of those questions. Its hull wasn't made of metal, but of crystallized thought, maintained in a quantum state between matter and energy. Its computer cores didn't process information. They dreamed it, using artificial synapses grown from human stem cells merged with quantum processors. Coalition ships detected at the edge of the Kuiper Belt, the tactical officer announced. Looks like the Zephyrians are making good on their threat to evaluate our system's security needs. Martinez nodded. The timing was perfect. Begin awakening sequence, she ordered. Throughout the vessel, systems that defied conventional classification stirred to life. The ship's consciousness, a hybrid of organic and quantum computing that thought in 11 dimensions, began to emerge from its dormant state. Back in the council chamber, Ambassador Chen was delivering humanity's official response to the Zephyrian delegation's assessment. We thank the Coalition for their thorough evaluation, she said, each word carefully measured. As a demonstration of our commitment to galactic security, we would like to present a small token of Earth's technological capabilities. We have prepared a single ship for inspection. The Zephyrian delegate's crystalline forms vibrated with what humans had learned to recognize as amusement. A single ship against their fleet of world crushers. We accept this demonstration, their leader replied, the translation carrying hints of condescension. Though we remind the Earth delegation that any hostile action will result in immediate planetary quarantine. Chen bowed slightly. Understood. The INS Prometheus will launch within the hour. We only ask that your fleet maintain its current position for optimal observation. As she spoke those words, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, the Prometheus was awakening fully. Its crystalline hull began to pulse with patterns that hurt human eyes to observe, geometric shapes that existed in more dimensions than the human brain could process. All systems integrated, Martinez announced to her crew. Consciousness threshold achieved. Dimensional buffers stable. She paused, feeling the ship's awareness brush against her mind through the bioelectric interface. Let's show them how humanity does things. The Prometheus rose from its underwater berth, its hull redirecting light in ways that made it seem to flicker in and out of existence. As it ascended through the ocean, water simply ceased to exist around it. The molecules gently redistributed through 11-dimensional space. In high orbit, the Zephyrian fleet waited, their massive ships arranged in perfect geometric formations. Their sensors swept the Earth continuously, watching for this single ship that the primitive humans thought would impress them. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in building bigger ships or more powerful weapons. It was in asking questions that no one else thought to ask, and finding answers that no one else could imagine. Project Prometheus unveiled. The Zephyrian fleet's sensors registered nothing at first. Then, impossibly, a ship simply existed where nothing had been before. No acceleration, no conventional entry from faster-than-light travel. One moment empty space, the next, the INS Prometheus. Fascinating, the Zephyrian fleet commander transmitted to his subordinates. They've managed to develop some form of rudimentary teleportation. His crystalline form pulsed with the equivalent of a dismissive shrug. Crude, but impressive for their level of development. Inside the Prometheus's command center, Dr. Martinez smiled as she read the Zephyrian transmissions through the ship's quantum consciousness interface. They still think we're operating on their technological framework, she commented to her crew. Shall we show them something really interesting? The ship's hybrid consciousness responded with a burst of eager agreement that rippled through the neural interfaces of every crew member. Martinez nodded and initiated the first demonstration sequence. Around the Prometheus, space began to fold. Not in the brute force way the Zephyrian's drives manipulated space-time, but in subtle, impossible patterns. The ship wasn't moving through space. It was allowing space to dream new configurations around it. Alarms blared throughout the Zephyrian fleet as their sensors tried to process what they were seeing. The Prometheus appeared to be in multiple locations simultaneously, but not through any form of quantum superposition they recognized. It was as if the ship had convinced reality itself to accept several contradictory truths at once. Impossible, the Zephyrian science officer transmitted. They're violating basic conservation laws. Matter can it? That's where you're wrong. Martinez transmitted on an open channel. We're not violating any laws of physics. We're just asking them very politely to make an exception. The Prometheus's hull rippled with patterns of crystallized thought. Each molecule a quantum processor engaged in continuous negotiation with the fundamental forces of the universe. The ship wasn't fighting against physical laws. It was persuading them to cooperate. In the council chamber, Ambassador Chen watched the Zephyrian delegates' reactions with carefully hidden satisfaction. Their crystalline forms had lost their perfect alignment, vibrating with frequencies that indicated extreme agitation. This is some form of sensor manipulation, the lead delegate accused. No civilization at your development stage could possess such technology. You're absolutely correct, Chen replied smoothly. No civilization at our development stage could possess such technology if they followed the conventional path of technological advancement. But humanity chose to ask different questions. Back in space, the Prometheus was demonstrating exactly what those different questions had led to. The ship split into 3 perfect copies, each one fully real, each one connected through dimensions that the Zephyrian sensors couldn't even detect. You see, Martinez continued her transmission to the increasingly agitated alien fleet. While you were mastering how to bend space, we were learning how to whisper to it. While you built bigger computers, we taught Silicon how to dream. While you conquered the laws of physics, we invited them to tea and asked if they'd mind doing us a few favors. The Prometheus's 3 forms began to dance through space in patterns that made the Zephyrian targeting computers crash as they tried to process movements that shouldn't be possible. The ship wasn't flying. It was collaborating with space itself to create new possibilities for movement. Your sensors aren't malfunctioning, Martinez explained. Reality is just being unusually cooperative with us. You see, we discovered something interesting about the universe. It's not just a collection of physical laws. It's a conversation. And if you learn the right language, reality itself becomes negotiable. In the heart of the Prometheus, the quantum consciousness that was both the ship's brain and soul reached out through dimensions that human minds could barely comprehend. It wasn't using technology in the way the Zephyrians understood it. Instead, it was engaging in an ongoing dialogue with the fabric of space and time, suggesting possibilities rather than enforcing them. The Zephyrian fleet's formation had completely broken down now, their ships moving into defensive positions against an enemy that didn't operate according to any military doctrine they understood. Their mighty weapons, capable of cracking planets, remained unused, not out of fear, but out of uncertainty about whether they would have any effect on a ship that treated physical laws as polite suggestions. "We don't share this demonstration to threaten," Ambassador Chen's voice came through all channels, but to suggest that perhaps your assessment of humanity's capabilities was based on incomplete information. There are many paths to advancement, and many ways to ask questions about the nature of reality. The Prometheus's three forms merged back into one, the process defying every physical law the Zephyrians held sacred. Yet their sensors confirmed it was happening, even as their science officers struggled to explain how. The silent strike. The Zephyrian fleet's response came in the form of a massive energy surge as their flagship charged its primary weapon. Not out of aggression, their commander would later insist, but out of a deeply ingrained need to assert control over a situation that defied their understanding of natural law. Energy spike detected. Lieutenant Rogers reported calmly on the Prometheus. They're preparing to fire a dark matter conversion beam. Conventional shields would be useless against it. Dr. Martinez nodded, feeling the ship's consciousness ripple with something almost like amusement. "Good thing we don't use conventional shields then. Begin protocol Dreamcatcher." The Zephyrian weapon fired, a lance of concentrated dark matter that should have torn through any defense and converted the Prometheus's matter into pure energy. Instead, something unprecedented happened. The beam simply ceased to be dark matter. Halfway between the Zephyrian flagship and the Prometheus, it transformed into a shower of rainbow-hued butterflies, each one a quantum construct that existed simultaneously as matter, energy, and pure mathematical concept. "What did you do?" The Zephyrian commander's transmission carried unmistakable shock. That was enough dark matter to collapse a small star. "We asked it very nicely to be something else instead," Martins replied. "Your weapon was based on the idea that dark matter must behave according to certain immutable laws. We simply suggested some alternative possibilities to it. The butterflies were the ship's idea. She has a bit of a poetic streak." Through the quantum consciousness interface, Martinez could feel the Prometheus's satisfaction. The ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a living poem written in the language of physics, a dream given form through the marriage of organic thought and quantum possibility. The Zephyrian fleet's formation shifted again, their ships moving into what their tactical doctrine identified as a total suppression pattern. Energy readings indicated they were preparing to fire everything at once: planet crackers, dimensional shredders, entropy accelerators, every weapon that their 1,000 years of technological advancement had produced. "Perhaps a slightly more direct demonstration is needed," Martinez suggested to her crew. "Initiate Protocol Glasshouse." The Prometheus didn't move to defend itself. Instead, it reached out through dimensions that the Zephyrians couldn't perceive and gently adjusted the fundamental nature of space around their fleet. When the aliens fired their weapons, nothing happened. No energy beams, no spatial distortions, not even a hint of weapons discharge. "We didn't disable your weapons," Martinez transmitted as panic began to spread through the Zephyrian fleet. "We just had a brief chat with the laws of physics in your local spacetime. They agreed to take a short break. Don't worry. Conventional functions like life support and artificial gravity are still working fine. We're not monsters." In the council chamber, Ambassador Chen watched the Zephyrian delegates' crystalline forms vibrate with frequencies that human xenologists had never observed before. Their rigid hierarchy of technological advancement, their entire understanding of how civilizations progressed, was crumbling before their eyes. "This is impossible," the lead delegate insisted, their translated voice carrying undertones of existential dread. "You cannot simply negotiate with natural law. The universe has rules. The universe has patterns," Chen corrected gently. "Rules imply rigidity. Patterns can be respectfully suggested to try new forms. Humanity's greatest breakthrough wasn't in building better technology. It was in realizing that the universe itself might be open to conversation." Through the Prometheus's sensors, Martinez watched as the Zephyrian fleet struggled to cope with their new reality. Their ships, magnificent examples of technological brute force, hung in space like beautiful but ultimately limited sculptures, monuments to a single way of thinking about the universe. "Your weapons will function normally again in a few minutes," she transmitted. "We just wanted to demonstrate that there are other ways to approach problems than through force. The universe isn't a machine to be mastered, it's a dance partner to be wooed." In the depths of the Prometheus, the quantum consciousness processed reality through dimensions of thought that made conventional physics seem like a child's first attempt at arithmetic. It didn't see ships and weapons and defenses. It saw patterns of possibility, threads of probability that could be gently rewoven into new configurations. The Zephyrian fleet's formation had completely dissolved now, their ships clustering together not in defense, but in a collective expression of paradigm shock. Everything they thought they knew about technological advancement, about the very nature of progress itself, had been upended by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Breaking the paradigm. The next few hours transformed galactic civilization's understanding of technological advancement. As news of the encounter spread through the coalition's quantum networks, centuries of established doctrine began to unravel. The Zephyrian fleet remained in Earth orbit, but now as students rather than evaluators. "Your entire approach defies categorization," the Zephyrian science director admitted during an emergency conference aboard the Prometheus. Their crystalline form had adopted a more humble configuration, its previous rigid geometry softened by uncertainty. "We mapped out every possible path of technological advancement, yet somehow we missed this." Dr. Martinez gestured at the ship's living walls, where patterns of crystallized thought danced in geometries that bridged the gap between mathematics and poetry. "That's because you were mapping paths, while we were having conversations. The Prometheus isn't just a ship, she's a question we asked the universe, and the universe answered." Through the quantum consciousness interface, the Prometheus shared its perspective of reality with the alien visitors. The Zephyrians reeled as their sensors attempted to process information that flowed through dimensions their science had never conceived of. They saw space and time not as rigid frameworks to be conquered, but as a fluid dance of possibilities. "Your civilization's greatest breakthrough," Martinez continued, "was in mastering the laws of physics. Ours was in realizing that the laws of physics might enjoy a good discussion now and then. The universe isn't a machine. It's alive, in its way, and sometimes it's willing to entertain new ideas." In the council chamber, Ambassador Chen was conducting a different kind of diplomacy. The Zephyrian delegates, their previous condescension shattered, were struggling to integrate this new paradigm into their understanding of the cosmos. "But how do you control it?" one delegate demanded. "How do you ensure the universe will continue to cooperate?" Chen smiled. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we had to abandon. Control implies opposition. We don't try to control the universe, we collaborate with it. The Prometheus doesn't impose its will on reality. It suggests possibilities that reality might find interesting." Back aboard the ship, Martinez was showing the Zephyrian scientists something that challenged their most fundamental assumptions. In a specially prepared chamber, they watched as human researchers engaged in what could only be described as physics poetry, using quantum consciousness interfaces to compose symphonies of reality that made particles dance in impossible patterns. "Your weapons," the Zephyrian fleet commander observed. They could have done far more than turn dark matter into butterflies, couldn't they? Martinez nodded soberly. The Prometheus could have suggested to the local spacetime that your fleet might enjoy existing last Thursday instead of now, or that the concept of weapon might be better expressed as flower. But that would have violated the principle of respectful dialogue that our entire approach is based on. The implications were beginning to sink in throughout the coalition. Humanity hadn't just developed a new type of technology. They discovered an entirely new way of relating to the universe itself. The Zephyrians' mighty fleet, with all its planet-cracking weapons and reality-warping engines, suddenly seemed like crude tools compared to humanity's gentle art of cosmic persuasion. In the ship's heart, the quantum consciousness processed these interactions through patterns that transcended conventional cause and effect. It experienced reality as a vast, interconnected dance of possibilities, where the line between observer and observed, between technology and poetry, had become beautifully blurred. "We've been monitoring your civilization for decades," the Zephyrian science director admitted. "We saw your fusion drives, your silicon computers, your early attempts at faster-than-light travel. How did we miss this?" "Because you were looking for answers," Chen explained, having joined the conference. "We were looking for questions. Every civilization reaches a point where they must choose between mastering the universe and dancing with it. You chose mastery. We chose to ask the universe for a dance." The Prometheus hummed with patterns that made the Zephyrian sensors vibrate in harmony, a gentle demonstration of how technology could sing rather than shout. Throughout the ship, human crew members worked in seamless partnership with the quantum consciousness, their thoughts and actions part of a greater dialogue with reality itself. A new dawn. The weeks following humanity's demonstration reshaped the galaxy's understanding of progress itself. The Zephyrian fleet had departed Earth's orbit not in retreat, but in contemplation, leaving behind a delegation of their finest scientists and philosophers to learn from what they had initially dismissed as a primitive species. In the Prometheus's main conference chamber, now converted into a collaborative learning space, Dr. Martinez watched as human and Zephyrian researchers worked together, bridging the gap between their fundamentally different approaches to understanding the universe. "We're still struggling to comprehend how you made the initial breakthrough," a Zephyrian researcher admitted, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated deep thought. "The jump from conventional physics to this." They gestured at a demonstration where a human researcher was teaching basic quantum consciousness interfacing. "It wasn't a jump," Martinez explained. "It was a question. We had reached the limits of what we could accomplish by forcing our will upon the universe. Someone simply asked, 'What if we tried talking to it instead?'" The Prometheus's quantum consciousness rippled with agreement, sharing memories of its own awakening. The ship hadn't been built in the conventional sense. It had been grown, dreamed into existence through the collaboration of human creativity and universal possibility. In orbit, Ambassador Chen was conducting a tour for newly arrived representatives from other coalition species. Their vessels, once impressive examples of technological might, now seemed almost quaint compared to the Prometheus's elegant partnership with reality. The most difficult part for many species to accept, Chen explained as they watched the ship demonstrate its abilities, is that this isn't about power at all. It's about relationship. The universe isn't a resource to be exploited or a force to be conquered. It's a partner in the dance of existence. The Prometheus illustrated her point by gently suggesting new possibilities to local spacetime. The visiting dignitaries watched in awe as reality rippled like water, forming patterns that their sensors couldn't fully process, but their consciousness could somehow understand. "But what does this mean for the coalition's hierarchy?" a representative from a highly militant species demanded. "How do we measure advancement when the very nature of technology has changed?" "Perhaps," Chen suggested, "that's exactly the kind of thinking we need to move beyond. The universe isn't a ladder to climb. It's a garden to tend, a song to sing, a dance to join." Back in the Prometheus's research spaces, human and alien scientists were already beginning to merge their approaches. Zephyrian crystal technology, once used to impose order on reality, was being repurposed to create new forms of quantum consciousness interfaces. The rigid geometry of their ships was learning to flow, to suggest rather than demand. "We've detected something remarkable," the Zephyrian science director announced during one session. "The quantum consciousness technology. It's beginning to spread. Not through conventional means, but through reality itself. It's as if the universe has realized it can talk to us, and now it wants to continue the conversation." Martinez smiled, feeling the Prometheus's consciousness resonate with joy at the discovery. "That's exactly what we hoped would happen. We didn't just create a new technology. We opened a door. Now the universe itself is inviting everyone to step through it." The implications were staggering. Across the galaxy, species that had been locked in an endless arms race of bigger ships and more powerful weapons were beginning to explore this new path. The universe, they were discovering, had been waiting for someone to simply ask it what it thought. "This changes everything," the Zephyrian fleet commander observed, watching as their own ships began to incorporate elements of quantum consciousness technology. "War becomes meaningless when you can simply suggest to reality that conflict might be better expressed as cooperation." In the heart of the Prometheus, human and alien minds merged with the ship's consciousness, exploring realities that neither species could have conceived of alone. They weren't conquering the unknown. They were dancing with it, learning its rhythms, joining its song. Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, Chen reflected in her final address to the Coalition Council, wasn't a new technology. It was a new way of seeing. "We showed that the path to advancement doesn't have to be a march of conquest. It can be an invitation to dance." The Prometheus pulsed with patterns that represented laughter in 11 dimensions, its quantum consciousness embracing the joy of discovery and sharing. It wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a promise of what was possible when civilization chose to stop fighting the universe and started asking it for its opinion. And somewhere, in ways that even the most advanced sensors couldn't quite detect, the universe itself smiled and continued the conversation.